Hello and welcome to the Rask Network. What you're about to hear and see is limited to general financial information only. Please be sure to speak to your financial planner or refer to our financial services guide available at rask.com.au/FSG before acting on the information.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm joined by Zara. Zara, how are you?
Good, Jordan. How are you?
Good,
Sorry,
good.
I'm still laughing.
That's
from
okay.
our pre-conversation.
Yeah, let's fill everyone in. What were we talking about?
I was just, as you said, I was on an 8-minute rant about a podcast that I'm enjoying and listening to at the moment.
What
And
podcast is that?
I was trying to encourage you guys to listen to it. Smartless. It's called Smartless with
Give us-
Jason Bateman, Will Arnett and Sean Hayes.
And you were saying that they bring someone in, but they don't tell the other two?
So there's like obviously the three hosts, and one host will find a guest and bring them onto the show, but the other two hosts don't know who it is. And so whether it's Sean or Will or Jason kind of introducing the guest, they kind of introduce all their accolades and everything about them. And it could be like an actor. And so it's awards that they've won or roles that they've played. And then you can see the other two trying to guess who it is as they're coming out. And then obviously it's like, this is Will Ferrell or this person or this person. Anyway, and it's really funny. And they've just done like a on the road kind of tour podcast series on Binge.
Yeah, cool. There you go. That's what we were just talking about.
That's what we were just talking about.
Zara was talking about, and we were listening.
For 8 minutes.
So
apparently.
do they prepare? So like, I
So
get
the
it.
host does. The host
Okay.
of the show prepares, and they have.
That could be a train wreck.
It could be a train wreck. No. So the host has like a list of questions
Okay,
that
cool.
they will kind of run through. But then obviously, because the other two just find out, they've got all of these like questions that they really want to ask this guest.
Yeah.
So then sometimes they kind of like step in first. And
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Interesting.
Anyway, so if you want to listen to it, there you go. Or you can watch it on Binge.
Yeah.
The roadshow, podcast roadshow. Today, we're not talking about that. We're talking about developing a bulletproof marketing strategy in 2025.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're going to start with some chaos.
Some chaos.
Some agency chaos.
Okay.
So I have a story
Yeah.
about a friend and they engaged in the agency where they were doing his SEO.
I feel like I know where this is going to go.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. Go.
And they engaged to do his SEO, and it was all good at first. I think it's called, I can't remember the term. There's like a term for it where like that he got really good results in the first few months, and then it just sort of dropped off. But during those few months where there were really good results, offered a 3-year contract because everything's so good. You know, we can double it. Price doubled. 3-year contract.
Oh my God.
Yeah, full on. And yeah, they
3-year
3 years.
contract.
3
God,
years.
who signs up for anything for 3 years?
I know, but you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Because when you're early on, and like I had no idea. I'm like, oh, okay. I mean,
This is
it's
what it
working.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So back to
terrifying.
what we spoke about in that last episode, or maybe the episode before, depending on when it airs. It's like you want to have a baseline understanding of whatever it is.
Totally.
If it's marketing, it's marketing. Because there's a lot of new terms in there where you don't know, I guess, much about what you don't know.
Yeah. And I think the unfortunate thing in the marketing world, or not necessarily marketing, but in agency world, is like there is an element of like education involved to get to a certain point to understand what service is being executed, whether the result's good, how to interpret and analyze the results. And I think because there's that level of education, which takes like years to get to a point where, you're actually good at it. And so I think there's this element where agencies will kind of take the mickey out of someone who's on the other side of the table, who doesn't understand, and kind of play into that a little bit. And it sounds like that's exactly what happened. And that's why so many agencies have such a bad rep, because they really play into the lack of education that so many business owners or just people that are engaging in their services have. And it's just so important for business owners to understand whether it's terminology, whether it's services that are offered, whether the results are actually good and how to analyze and interpret the results. Yeah. And if an agency is good, they should be educating you along the way. Like they should be really transparent about what they're seeing, why they're seeing it, how that translates into good or bad, and then how to turn it around.
Yeah, and I've sat in on the meetings that you have with a mutual client, and that's what we're talking about. Like they understand the click-through rates and the conversions, and it's so the conversations and the meetings are so much more valuable. Whereas I've sat on the other side where a client would ring me and say, investing X amount of dollars, whether $2-3 grand in monthly SEO costs, and in month one, like, we've gotten some results. I'm like, dude, that's so unlikely that it's because of that. It could just be because their GMB's set up, the Google My Business is set up properly. So it's just so important to have a baseline understanding. And I know we always speak about it, but it's just so true. Because if you don't, then you can get taken for a ride very quickly. And if it takes you 3 months to realize, you're paying $2,000-$3,000 a month
in servicing fee, plus if you're doing paid ads, and there's an advertising cost in there as well.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, even with opportunity cost too, because if they're focusing on SEO, $3,000 a month, but you should be doing some type of paid acquisition, well, there's 3-month opportunity cost there.
Absolutely.
So yeah, just baseline understanding, so important.
So important.
Today we're going to dive a bit deeper into marketing strategy and the importance of it. And I know we've spoken about the bad of agencies, but let's touch on the good.
Yeah, I mean, and there is, I guess maybe before we go into the good, maybe also talking a little bit more about the bad, or not necessarily bad, but sometimes the reality of the bad. Yeah. Obviously there's the experience part. I think the other part of that, which you sort of touched on with fees, is like typically there's really high overheads in an agency. There's a lot of people involved in an account. There's a lot of subscriptions, and there's a lot of software that they need to use to run an account, which means that their servicing fees are usually really high. But doubling in on that is like there's usually a sales team, and that sales team has a baseline salary and a commission. And so in order for the agency to make money off that sale or off that client, it needs to be really high, which on the bad part of that is that the client actually needs to make a lot of money through those advertising efforts to actually see like a return on investment, let alone like a return on ad spend. So there's just so much, involved. And I think, like you said, like understanding those internal profit margins as a business owner is super important. So you know what you can allocate towards marketing. But in terms of what's good about agencies, there is a lot of things, because they have so many clients that they would work on. So for example, they might be working on 200 clients. All of those clients say they spend $1,000 a month. That's $200,000 a month of learnings that are coming into a business that wouldn't be coming into, an in-house role, because you'd have to be spending $200,000 a month to get that amount of data and that amount of insight. So, and when I talk about that, it's like what's working, what platforms are working, what's trending, what's working on that particular platform, how to analyze and read that data. And that's something in terms of like resources agencies essentially have that a lot of other companies don't have, or in-house you won't have, or freelancers don't have, because a freelancer can't work on 200 accounts.
And to dive even deeper on that, it's not just that, but if you hire someone full-time, well, what's their role? Are they doing SEO? Are they doing the technical SEO? Like there's so many branches of the agency where there's SEO. There could be a Facebook ad specialist, Google ad specialist, email marketing specialist, someone who does all the socials. You can't just hire someone in-house for that. And if you do, the team's going to cost you $500,000. 5-6 people in there. So there are definitely, I would say, definitely a good side to using an agency.
Yeah, totally.
Because you can tap into all of that for a monthly service fee.
Exactly.
It's just making sure that they're not taking the mickey.
Absolutely. Yeah, you don't want to take the mickey. And I think also like because of that, because there is, all of this essentially data and insights coming into one corporation, and because people can really then focus and become experts, they can have, like you said, they can have a marketing expert, email marketing expert. They can have a paid advertising expert. They can have a Google Ads expert. They can have an organic marketing expert. So it just means that intelligence-wise, agencies are so smart, because they're not just bringing a bunch of skill sets together, but they're also bringing a whole bunch of brains together in different perspectives. So the way that someone in organic marketing is going to view something and analyze something versus someone in paid advertising versus someone in strategy, it's like having that diverse group of perspectives to look at a problem and to solve a problem. Again, you can get that in-house if you have a whole bunch of different people in a whole bunch of different areas, but you really need to have all those people, which is really, like you said, it's really hard to have internally as a business or in-house. And then also what comes from that is like the creativity of those discussions, like the out of the box ideas, that because you have all of these different perspectives and ways of approaching problems coming at a particular problem, you get all of these, just new ideas and suggestions that you probably wouldn't get access to otherwise, or it would take you, 2 or 3 times as long to get to that point, because you'd have to try so much and probably waste a lot of money.
Yeah, for sure.
To get there. So I think it's really just understanding when is the right time to engage an agency. And obviously that, like I said, it goes back to looking at profits and costs and revenue and understanding kind of when financially makes the most sense that you can invest time, money, potential risks. As with everything, there's a risk with every decision that we make. But when does it make the most sense? You can actually afford the fees and the advertising spend.
For sure. And when let's say we were, okay, cool, we've made the decision that we're going to start working with an agency. Step one, we know it's customer avatar.
Yep.
So how important is it to start there and to know your customer? I guess, would you want to know that before you start working with an agency, or is that something you would work out with the agency?
Yeah, I mean, again, it kind of depends on your business journey as to how far along in that you are, but knowing who your customer avatar is so important. Like, you need to know who you're talking to. You need to know who you're communicating with, who you're selling products to, who's buying your services. And so it's like not just kind of who they are demographically, but like what platforms do they use? What behaviors are they engaging in? Is it an older demographic? What platforms does an older demographic spend time on? So if you're going to be thinking about paid advertising, does TikTok make sense, or does Facebook or YouTube make sense? Because, YouTube is probably more geared, there is like an older demographic that's spending a lot more time on YouTube. So it's like, or is it a younger demographic? Where does that fit in, and where are they spending their time, and what platforms are they engaging in? And then understanding like how to communicate with them. So whether it's language vernacular, whether it's content, whether it's, what they're buying, how they're buying it, and how they're engaging, that is so important, because anything that you do from that point onwards is going to be a good investment. But if you're starting a business, or you've started a business and you've created a product who you think, or you want to sell to someone in their 30s, but then you put the product online, you maybe start investing some advertising in it, and the core demographic of people that are buying are women in their 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
But all of your marketing, all of your communication, all of your photos, like models, your website is geared to a 30-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, you just have this misalignment of who's buying and how you're communicating with them. And so then you kind of need to go, okay, well, whoa, we need to step back, and we need to go back to start, and we need to do another photo shoot, and we need to reboot our website, and we need to have a different customer service, and we need to communicate different product features and different benefits, because what appeals to a 30-year-old is going to be different to what appeals to a 60-year-old. But if you don't know that, you're just going to be wasting so much money in those early days trying to figure it out.
Yeah, that's so true. And when you work with the business, where do you generally start?
So we do something called like a brand audit, where we would look at like your current activities, so current marketing activities, what efforts you're putting in. Are you creating content all the time? What does that sort of look like? What your profit margins are. That's really important, because we need to know that, okay, well, if you're going to invest in this service, how much money does this particular platform or service need to make, so that we know that you're making money out of this? And having that really transparent conversation. If you're engaging in like Google Ads, for example, we need to know how many of those leads are coming in are actually converting into sales, and what the profit margin of those sales were before and after the work's being done. And then after you've kind of paid all of your team, what does that look like? What is the ticket that's coming into the business?
Yep.
So it's like, that's really important, because otherwise you're kind of, if you don't have the back end of that or the tail end of that conversation, and all you're saying is, okay, well, we got you 60 leads this month, and the client's like, yeah, but only 12 of those converted, and they were $100 tickets. And so you made us $1,200, but we paid you $5,000. It's like, and that's, I think, going back to kind of what happens in agencies sometimes, is they don't do that granular, or they don't have that granular conversation. So then there's this like friction between both parties, because the marketer's like, oh, we got them 60 leads, we're crushing it. But then the client's like, yeah, but the leads were garbage.
Yeah, it's so true.
So it's really, I guess that brand audit is really important. And then also understanding like your customer journey. So from the first point that someone engages with your business, what does that look like? What's your customer service like? Do we need to have a conversation around the quality of your customer service? Like, do you have someone on the phones answering client calls or prospective client calls that doesn't have a very good phone nature? And do we need to have a conversation? Do you have a sales script? Do you need a sales script? Like, how do you engage and have those conversations with businesses? Because even if the leads are really high quality, but you're sending them to a dead end street, what's the point? It's
so true. That whole process that you've just mapped out, generally what you see when working with an agency is that leads, if whatever it costs, but there's so many aspects to it, like looking at the whole customer journey from that initial phone call. Well, okay, if the leads aren't converting, well, why? Is it the customer manner at that initial conversation? Mm-hmm. Is it the if it's a trade business and the electrician's going out there, does he not have a sales script?
Yep.
There's so many steps to it. And I think if you can really take a step back and think like that, you'll start to see better results.
Absolutely.
Because you're working on different things as well.
Yep.
It's not just marketing, I need leads. Well, no, there's so much more to it. If you have too many leads, well, do you have capacity? Are you pricing your work properly? Have you taken into account what it costs to, if you get a lead for $200 and you charge 400, well, is there profit in that? Like, do you know what your labor cost is? Yeah. So I think it's so important that you do touch on all of those goals and make sure that there is that alignment there. And it's not just purely profit driven from that agency side.
And I think it's understanding that, like, when you're growing a business, like, marketing is a component.
Yeah.
Like, you can't build a business on marketing if your sales process is garbage, if you have really crappy internal operations and your finances, you're not across your finances. It's like, then you know, it's this kind of, obviously there's so many more things involved, but like, they're kind of your 4 core pillars of business. And if you're only focusing on one, so it's going to crumble.
It's
How
so
do
true.
you can't build a business focusing on one thing. It's a holistic kind of conversation that you need to be having.
100%. And you hear sometimes with like e-com businesses, that's what they'll focus on is the marketing. Well, no, because there's still that operations part of the business. Yeah. Like, what if you put an order in today, but it's not going to come for 3 months? Well,
absolutely. And I've worked with businesses like that, like in like the fashion space. There was a business owner that we were working with who had a really slow lead time from when she had designed a product to having it shipped to then doing kind of that first round of feedback. And so she would have a plan. Okay, cool. We're going to launch this new collection 1st of January, 2024. Whatever, you know, but then it rolls around to like the 20th of December and she hasn't got the first piece of stock.
Yeah.
And so she's like, well, how am I going to do a photo shoot? How am I going to update my website? And so all of these things, but then obviously the delay is costing money because then there's all these other activities that have been put on hold, hoping for this collection launch to happen on the 1st of January. So there's just so many things that are involved in particularly e-com is like, so I think there's a lot of people that go, I'm going to start an e-com business. I'm going to sell a product. But it's like the research, the manufacturing, how long is that manufacturing process? What's the quality of that manufacturing process? The review process after you've gotten that first round of product, because you have to review the product all the time because you need to have like quality control. So it's just there's so many things involved.
I agree. Whether it's product or service-based business, I think it all starts with operations.
Yep.
Making sure that the systems and processes are in place, and you don't want to scale too quickly. You want to try and it's hard, right? Like you want to try and preempt as much as you can and have those processes in place.
Yeah.
What are 3 common mistakes businesses make in their marketing strategies?
I think kind of tapping into what I said earlier is that like product market fit.
Yep.
So that conversation that I had about the business that had created a product for 30-year-olds, but it was, 50, 60-year-olds. And that's a true story. It was a business that I was working with, an Aussie-based kind of women's fashion company. And they did a photo shoot, which they paid a scary amount of money for. It was their first photo shoot, but the idea behind it was, let's get a whole bunch of influencers and kind of create this really beautiful photo shoot, and that's going to sell the product. But hadn't focused on like a communication strategy, didn't have a solid marketing strategy in place. And they had a brick and mortar store with it as well. And so there was just so many things that then we started paid advertising. We started running Meta ads and Instagram ads for the product. And the core demographic that was buying was women in their 50s and 60s. But no one on the business page in terms of the website or the Instagram represented women in their 50s and 60s.
Yep.
So then, but all the money had been spent on this photo shoot early days, that then there was no money to invest in a photo shoot that actually reflected the customers that were buying. So then it was like an iPhone quality photo shoot, and, it just snowballed downhill from there.
Yeah.
So product market fit is really important. So making sure that the product that you've created, A, is solving a problem. I think solving a problem that exists and that people want solved is important. If you are kind of creating a problem, there's just so much more work and education involved, because you're trying to tell people, hey, you actually have a problem with this thing that you didn't know you had a problem with, and you also need a solution to this thing. Whereas if you know that there's a problem that exists already in a particular target market or a particular demographic, and you ideally need to solve that problem better than any of your competitors, because otherwise then it's just a war on price.
Yep.
So it's like your product itself needs to do a better job of everything else around you in that, product market. So I think that's probably the most common one that I would see. I think the second thing I would say is like having a lack of goals, like no general kind of direction forward. So, and I know there's a lot of people out there who will say like, I don't have business goals. I just go with the flow. But you're like shaking your head. Yeah. But it's kind of like, and I think we spoke about it on an episode in December, that it's kind of like getting in the car and like turning your car on. I was going to like do the key movement, and I'm like, you can obviously tell how, I grew up a while ago. You had keys. It wasn't a button press.
Yeah, true.
But so it's like get in the car and you just don't have a map. You have no idea where you're going. So it's like, the example that we used in the past was like, cool, you get in and you're like, cool, I'm going for a beach holiday. I've got my bathers, I've got my towel, I've got my sunblock, and I've got an umbrella. And then all of a sudden you start driving because you have zero maps and you have no direction, and you end up a mountain in the snow.
Yeah.
In swimwear.
Yeah.
And so it's like you just kind of can end up in a totally different direction on a totally different path that you haven't prepared for and your business isn't ready for. So
true.
If you don't have goals, that mistake, like rectify. And then I think the third thing, probably less so on like business kind of side of it, but more on the market, is like ignoring your organic marketing.
Yeah.
And only focusing on paid advertising.
Yeah.
Or only focusing on organic marketing. Like I think it's like they go together, right? But you need to start with organic, because if you start running paid ads to a business that has 0 testimonials, 0 reviews, 0 previous customers, then it's just so much hard. Like the trust that you have to try and build with new customers is so much harder. So it makes your job so much harder.
Yeah. For sure.
You're probably going to need to spend more money, rather than if you have an organic community that is already raving about your products, is already using your products, and is kind of doing some of the legwork for you, and then you put some paid spend behind that. It's like how I guess the analogy that I kind of use is like paid ads is kind of your accelerant to your fire. So it's like, you need to use your wood, you need to scrunch up your newspaper at the bottom, and then you kind of add your fuel, and that's your accelerant. But you need to build your business, or you need to build that fire from that organic component first.
Yeah, for sure. To touch on that second point that you made about the like having no goals, every business owner should be striving towards something.
Yes.
Otherwise, sometimes, you're like on the hamster wheel, just going around in circles, and it can be a revenue target, it can be a staffing target. Whatever your metric is, you want to be able to measure something. And we always go off revenue and having revenue targets, because you can reverse engineer that in so many ways, whether it's if your average customer value is $5,000, well, in order to get to 20K a month, you need to get 4 new customers. Okay, cool. Well, how am I going to get those customers? Is it paid ads? There's just so many ways you can reverse engineer it. Does that mean you need another staff member? Okay, cool. We'll take that into account as well. So I think it's so important that second point of like having no goals, no excuse. Like you need to have something. Yeah. Whether it's
Not to mention it's motivating.
Yeah,
you need
for sure.
to be like self-motivated. And if you don't know what you're working towards, if you've got a team of people and you don't know what you're working towards, they have no idea of what they're working towards. So then there's this element of like lack of like alignment with you and the business, because they don't know what they're doing there.
So
What's
true.
their purpose? And at the end of the day, everyone needs a purpose. Everyone is working towards something bigger, whether that be as a business owner, growing your business through revenue, through more products, whatever it might be. As an employee, maybe it's a salary progression, maybe it's like a promotion, maybe it's a new role, new responsibilities. But you need to know how your position helps to grow in that direction.
So true. So true. And the staff thing's a big one as well, because you want to have buy-in.
Yeah.
And we mentioned in one of the previous ones, we're getting on the bus and good to great. So you want to make sure that you have goals, because you need direction. Yep. You need direction, especially when you're calling the shots.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't have buy-in from the staff, you're going in blindly.
Not to mention, if the staff are executing the work or they're client-facing, they need to be able to sell that vision to everyone else, or the rest of the team around them, but also pass it on to the clients that you might be working with as well.
And you want them to be able to see that there's progression if they accelerate in their role. So super important. What exactly is a marketing strategy, and why is it so important for small to medium businesses?
That's a big question.
Loaded.
But that's the purpose of this episode. So it's really, I guess, going back to understanding your positioning in the market. So understanding your competitors, understanding who your target demographic is, how to connect and, whether it be channels, platforms, how to connect with those customers, where to invest your time and your efforts essentially to get the best results moving forward, to grow the business. So typically where we would start is like, we start with like a big, hairy, audacious goal, and it might be like a 2-year goal. It could be a revenue target. Typically it's a revenue target when you're talking to business owners. And we do exactly that. We reverse engineer backwards. And so we go, okay, well, in order to hit $2 million in 24 months, what do we need to hit in 12 months? Okay, what do we need to hit in 6? And then what do we need to hit in 3? And then what you kind of do is you end up having these almost like stepping stone blocks of, okay, now I actually know, because to sit here and be like, I want to hit $2 million in 2 years, how the heck are you going to get there? What do you need to do? You don't know. But if you go, okay, well, in 3 months, I know I need to have had 25 discovery calls or sent out 30 quotes, and I need to have signed 10 clients, and, you've got and then you go, oh, okay, cool. So I need 10 new clients. Okay, breaks it down into these like bite-sized chunks that you can actually work with. And then it kind of becomes these like measurable, SMART goals.
Yeah.
Like measurable goals that you can say, yes, tick, I did this. Oops, no, haven't met that. Here's where I can rectify and move forward. And then you kind of know once you've hit these things, maybe your goal plates or your timeline is 3 months. Maybe it takes you a bit longer, but you know that you don't really move on to this 6-month thing until you've achieved everything in your 3-month list. So it gives you these stepping stones and blocks of what to do and how to do it.
The good thing about that is the business owner, knowing like whatever their specific industry is, they can then use those goals and then piggyback off that in terms of, okay, well, if the revenue gets to 2 million, do you have enough storage space? Do you need a commercial unit? It really does just depend. So if I was a new business, how would you approach developing a marketing strategy?
So I would look, I guess, kind of building on from what we've said to avoid repetition, but I would look at ways that you can organically engage with your audience first. So that could be through coming up with 3 really core content pillars, or like communication pillars. So you know that every piece of content or communication that goes out abides by one of these 3 pillars. And it could be, one pillar could be, educational kind of branded content. So it's about you, it's about the business, behind the scenes, your product, your service, whatever. Your second pillar could be like entertaining, engaging content. So it could be a little bit more team stuff, like less of a sales or a business focus. And then you've kind of got like what we would call like a conversion pillar or like a sales pillar, and that's your hard sell.
Yep.
But the thing is, you don't want all educational content, because then people don't actually get to know the people behind the business. And that's, in this world of digital kind of e-commerce and lack of kind of brick and mortar shopping and these kinds of things, that personality component is so important, because people want to know that transparency. We want to know who we're buying from. Is it an ethical business? Who are the team behind it? And that we've spoken in extent about a few businesses that do it really, really well in Oz. But then you also don't only want to focus on that, because then you kind of, I think, in my opinion, it takes away from the authority and the value of the business. If all you're doing is focusing on behind the scenes, funny content, team content, then you're kind of like, well, what's your product?
Yeah. And
like, how do I know you're any good? Because you haven't shown me that you have really good results, or you don't have client testimonials, or you haven't told me about the tech specs, the features, the benefits of your product.
Yep.
So I don't actually know how it works.
Yep.
And then you also don't just want to have sales content, because who the heck wants to be sold to, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you need to kind of break it up in these 3 different ways to have this really effective communication strategy, which is what it's all about, is having a really effective communication strategy, build your audience, and then you kind of go from there. And if you can kind of build this organic community first, then you've got a bunch of people that are doing a bunch of the legwork for you.
And when does the design or the tech stack recommendation start to come in?
I think early days.
Yeah.
Like, you said earlier, like operations is like a core component. And I think that's part of it, is like that tech stack, the design stack, whether it's like your internal communication tech stack, Slack, you got a project management software, maybe Monday or ClickUp or whatever it might be. There's hundreds
Industry
out there.
specific.
Industry specific. You guys use Ignition.
Carbon.
Yep.
Service made if you're a tradie.
Yeah. So,
just depends.
But that's just like, you need that from the beginning, because you need to know how you're going to deliver the service.
Yeah.
And whether it's just you, whether it's you and 3 other people, it's so much easier to build it out when it's just you, because you've got time, because you're not going to be loaded up with clients. I mean, heck yeah, if you are, props to you. But the reality is you're probably not going to be. So it's like, spend the time building out these a tech stack, which is essentially, I guess for people that don't know what a tech stack is, it's a bunch of software that you essentially line up to help improve the internal communications and information flow in your business.
And they can all talk to each other and integrate.
Saves you a bunch of time as well in the long term.
Because the more efficient you become, the less manual things you have to do, the better your bottom line is. So I agree. Get onto it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Can you explain the role of a marketing agency and when a business should consider hiring one as opposed to doing it themselves?
Yeah. So I think once you've gotten to a point where, again, going back to like understanding that profitability of your business, and part of that kind of, I guess, using like the balance, like the profit and loss spreadsheet that Daniel's got in the community that we can link in the show notes, but essentially put everything out there and be like, okay, cool. I know that I have $5,000, $10,000, $2,000, whatever that figure might be a month, and you can invest that in marketing. And then you can also say, okay, well, what does that do to my bottom line? If I continuously invest $5,000 every month for the next 6 months, what do my figures look like? And is this sustainable? And that $5,000 could be broken up with like advertising spend, agency fee, whatever. And so I think once you can do that and you can go, yep, okay, cool. I can afford to spend $5,000 a month every month, and it's not going to bottom me out, and I can, we can sustainably do this, but also then putting in what that potential growth could be.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
It's like, okay, cool. If we invest $5,000, okay, your business isn't going to change overnight, but it's like if we kind of grow slowly and sustainably, which is what we encourage, sustainable growth, so that your systems and your processes and your people can move with you. So it's like you can sustainably grow continuously month on month. Then the benefit of that is that you can see what that profit and what that growth looks like for the business. And if you can do that, ongoingly, amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's what I would probably say is like once you can do that and, feel great about it. And then I would say make sure that you're doing some education along the way.
What do you mean by that?
So for example, I was working with a client who we were running their Facebook ads. Part of the strategy was in order to do that, or for us to do that for her, she wanted to be educated along the way. So part of the service agreement was like, cool, we're going to loop you in when we're making changes to your account, and we're going to tell you why we're doing them. We're going to tell you what we're doing. And then she also did a course in the background, like with another company, like online course on her own. So then she could, and it was amazing because then she could come into our like WIP, like, working in progress, like report calls or whatever, and say, hey, I had a look at the account. I noticed that you turned off this ad, or I noticed that you increased the budget here, or I noticed that you did this. Why did you do it?
Yeah.
And so it was just such an intelligent conversation because it was less of like, as a marketer having to say, hey, so we've made some new creatives this month and we're, strategically split testing and blah, blah, blah. She could say, what are you split testing? Why are you split testing? Are you split testing because the click-through rate was too low, or are you split testing because that click-through rate's really great and you're trying to grow and improve on that?
Yep.
Like, what is the focus here?
Yep.
And so it just meant, again, that conversation was so much more intelligent and much more enjoyable as like a marketer or an expert on the other side of the table, because I'm like, oh, heck yeah, like I can actually get to the meat and bones of this. It's not just, we're not having a little entree over here. We're like, the meat and potatoes is what my father-in-law would say. Get into the meat and potatoes of things.
The good stuff.
Which is the good stuff, exactly.
I know we touched on it at the start of the episode, but a lot of people do have bad experiences with agencies.
Yeah.
Why do you think, just to touch on it again, why do you think that happens?
I think one of the core things is like the high servicing fees, which we kind of explained is because of high overheads, and probably like a lack of education. I think the other thing is what agencies typically do to reduce their overheads is they bring on more junior team members. And I guess this is a generalization, but it's a generalization across quite a few agencies. But typically what's quite common is they will bring on junior team members so that the more senior people can move away from the execution work so they can focus on the strategy.
Yep.
And the idea behind that is like, cool, let's get the best person coming up with a strategy for our account possible. And absolutely, why would you not? But then you have like an A-grade strategy that you're passing on to somebody with 12 months of experience. And so their ability to interpret that strategy, execute that strategy often isn't in alignment, which is why the results flop.
Yeah.
So the other thing I would say is probably depending on the size of the organization, and every organization is different, culture's different, because it is usually really fast-paced environment, and in order to keep overheads at a point that are profitable for the business, the team members or the account managers will probably have a lot of clients that they're working on, right? And, you know, there's lots of different industries where someone can work on 50 accounts and it's okay. But in marketing, because it's like there's communication involved, there's strategy involved, sometimes there might be execution involved, something has to give at some point. And usually the thing that gives is the results and the quality of work. And usually because the employees are severely overworked.
Yeah.
And they're trying to hit KPIs and they're trying to hit targets. And some of those KPIs might be a retention strategy, which, you know, if you're getting good results, then amazing. But some of those KPIs could be around like upselling clients for the sake of upselling clients.
Yeah, when they don't need it.
When they don't need it, yeah. And so, you know, and not necessarily out of a sense of like, oh, we're just going to take their money, but more of like, oh, they're doing okay, let's give them this service.
Yeah.
Without going back to that. And again, because these people are probably quite junior, they don't go back to that first part of saying, okay, what is the profitability of the business if we pay another $2,000 a month and invest in email marketing as well as paid advertising? Like, what does that do for your bottom line?
Yeah.
That's the conversation that's typically missing. And so even though I think that there's all of these amazing resources available, like we spoke about earlier, in terms of like the creativity and the learning and the education and the insights and the data that come into agencies, because people are so overworked, even though there's these amazing resources, there's a lack of ability they don't have the time to utilize those resources. So there could be incredible training programs. There could be amazing staff resources and upskilling opportunities, but because they're trying to manage 15 clients and 15, which when I say 15 clients, it's 15 businesses.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like 15 clients might not sound like much, but that's 15 businesses that you're responsible for the marketing for. So that's like, cool, I'm working on a skincare client. I take that hat off. Now I'm working on a plumber. Now I take that hat off. And now I'm working on a, you know, footy client. Maybe I'm selling shoes now. Now I'm doing this. So it's like you're changing not just like strategies, but like products. You're changing like what you should have is like the full understanding of like how that business works, profit margins, all these kinds of things. That is exhausting.
For sure.
It's
especially
really hard.
If it's different service lines too. Like one of those clients is just Facebook ads and their budget's huge, and then you have to switch and go to email marketing, and like it's that plus all the different service lines as well. So
yeah. And so it's not that the people that are these account managers are they're not wanting to do the wrong thing. They want to do the best thing that they possibly can for the clients that they're working with. But can you imagine like how hard it is being how challenging it can be being a business owner and trying to be like, yes, this is the right marketing strategy for my business.
Yeah.
And then do that for another 14 clients in a week.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
It is.
And so then what you are doing is you've got 30 hours in a week, 40 hours in a week, divide that by 14 businesses. How much time you spend? So, and you know, to execute a marketing strategy, you need a serious chunk of time, and you need to be able to analyze data and invest time into creatives and creative strategy. But not to mention your creative juices run out.
Yeah.
If you're trying to do that for 14 businesses every week, it's like, I don't have any ideas, or I'm going to copy and paste my ideas because this worked for this business. If I copy it across to 7 other businesses, it saves me a chunk of time.
So true. How often should a business be reviewing and adjusting its marketing strategy?
Always. Yeah. So it's dynamic. It's always evolving. It's like, you know, the success on certain platforms is going to change. The algorithms change. You should always be sort of reassessing what's working, what's not working. And, you know, if you were to work with an agency, they would do like a monthly review, or, you know, as like a bigger picture of the strategy and what's working and how to kind of grow it and scale it. And so at a minimum, like a monthly review. I wouldn't recommend week by week basis because so much changes in a week.
Yep.
But a monthly review gives you a pretty good snapshot of like, cool, where are we at here? Where are we at the previous month? And then I would also say, like, if you're like thinking about like what's translating into dollars, do like a quarter on quarter or like a period review. So like, cool, if you're an e-com business, obviously Black Fridays has a huge opportunity for you. Don't just look at like Black Friday 2024. What is Black Friday 2024 against Black Friday 2023? And what did that growth look like? And did you see growth? Because maybe you had this big, hairy, audacious goal of being like, I'm going to make 500 grand in 3 months, which like 6 sounds awesome.
Yeah.
But maybe last year you only made 100.
Yeah.
So how are you going to 5x your growth if you're not like going back and reviewing your strategy and what you're doing and what worked and what didn't work, and then constantly evolving that whilst that sales period is happening?
And how can a small business measure that success or measure the success of their marketing strategy?
So return on ad spend is one thing that you'll hear quite a lot about.
ROAS.
ROAS, yeah. And so that's essentially just how much money is this platform making for how much money am I putting into it. So it doesn't necessarily factor in, or it doesn't factor in service fees. So if you're working with an agency, so if you were running it in-house, maybe return on ad spend makes sense. But also you kind of probably want to factor in that person's salary. So if you've got a marketing manager that's running your Facebook ads, what else are they doing in their week and how much of their salary, it can get quite granular, but how much of their salary is allocated to that marketing work and what does that return on investment look like? Otherwise, return on ad spend might make sense.
Yeah.
If you're working with like a freelancer or an agency or essentially someone that's not a part of your business, you want to look at return on investment. So that's all out of all of the money that I've spent to make this campaign possible, how much money did I get back? So if you were doing email marketing, maybe you're engaging an agency, maybe you've got a subscription fee, whatever that looks like, that all comes into it. And the other thing I think is a really key one, which I think a lot of businesses neglect or they don't focus on, is like customer acquisition. So how much is your business growing, your database, how much is it growing month on month or year on year? And is that increasing? Because if you can reconvert a previous customer, significantly cheaper than trying to attain a new one.
100%.
So if your business is growing and you're selling to new people, what is your re-engagement strategy or retargeting or repurchase strategy to get them to buy from you again?
My favorite, metric to look at is the blended customer acquisition costs because it just wraps everything into it. I don't know if it's the most accurate, but I do know that it does take all of that stuff into account plus the ad spend.
Yeah.
So like your software, your staff costs on that example that you gave, and the ad spend at the same time too. So that's the one that I like checking in on and seeing what that's at.
Yeah.
Can a business like yours help a business owner with when they're forecasting their 3, 6 or their 12-month results?
I think it's interesting. Forecasting results is difficult in the sense of like no one knows what the future holds. So you can't kind of wave a magic wand and be like, if you come on board with us, we're going to make you 50 grand in 4 weeks.
Sign me up.
Because everyone will work with that person, right? Yep. And I think that's sometimes the concern of some agencies is that they'll use a whole bunch of case studies to really push something or a service that they've done 18 months ago.
Yep.
And obviously the case studies are there because they need to show you that they can do that thing and that thing's successful and there's no reason that it can't work for you. But I think if someone's sitting there saying, in 3 months, I will get you X amount of money, I'd be on the other side of that questioning like, cool, how are you going to do it? What's the check-in? What are the metrics that we're looking at to see that growth? Like essentially, how do you know? How do you know that you're going to make me that much money?
Yeah.
Because I don't know that I'm going to make me that much money. And so I think forecasting results is difficult, but what I would say is like those goals. So going back to those goals, what are your 12-month goals? What are your 6-month goals? What are your 3-month goals? So then regardless of whether you're working with a freelancer or an agency, you've got someone in-house, they've got something they're working towards. So they know that your goal for 3 months is to make whatever X. And then they go, okay, cool. Well, in January we hit this. In February we hit this. We either are like crushing it and we're like way above and we're going to like exceed our targets, or like, well, we need to make some pretty massive swings in the next 6 weeks to really turn results around. But if you just need to have those goals so people know what they're sort of like working towards. And then you can kind of build out those marketing campaigns and that support over those periods to make sure that you're working towards it. But I think it kind of comes back to like data, which I've spoken about a bit today. And it's just like the use of data is just like so important. What worked, particularly what didn't work.
Yeah.
Like what was a big fail, because you'll probably learn more from that than you will from what did work. What surprised you, I think, is really important. And then like how can you kind of leverage those channels or platforms or whatever you did that worked really well? How can you leverage them even more moving forward?
For sure. And what future trends do you see in marketing, and what do small business owners need to be aware of? And we touched on this in the lift.
We did. And it's something that I am, in all transparency, still learning about.
Yeah.
But it's just so interesting is like Web3 and decentralization. Using technologies like blockchain that can enable new forms of customer engagement for your business and drive that loyalty. And so there's a lot of different ways you can do it. But I think that's something that if you do want to learn more about it, there's so much information out there, which I'm becoming more and more aware of. And it's just so interesting. And then the other thing, which kind of, I guess, is like a build on that, is like community building and engagement.
Yeah.
I think that building online communities with the direction of kind of where the future is headed. Like these online communities around your brand are just going to be so, so important in fostering engagement, loyalty, advocacy for your business, and bringing people together in a space where there's so much technology and so many people are spending time online and so many people are quite isolated. Bringing people together on a platform that they're already kind of spending their time on, but creating these online communities that people can network with and foster relationships with is only going to be more and more important.
Yeah, I agree. And you can learn off different people sticking to marketing. Like, what are other people doing that you could be doing? Could you take something there and maybe change it a bit and use it in your business? So
absolutely.
I agree.
Yeah. And I think that quite often people will be like, oh, well, I'm a plumber. I'm not going to learn anything from e-com. And it's like so wrong.
Yeah.
Like there's so many things. Again, it's like with everything, it's like the principle is probably quite similar. It's the execution that's going to be different.
Yeah.
But there's a principle that this plumber might be doing that is absolutely working for them that you could be applying to an e-com business. It's just how you apply it is different. But the overarching theme or the principle or the strategy is going to be similar.
For sure. We've touched on so many things there.
We have, I know.
There's heaps of golden nuggets. If someone wanted to reach out and get some help with their marketing strategy, we will have a link in the show notes to book a disco call with Zara, and you can pick her brain around all of these things, and she'll be able to give you some suggestions on just where you can start. I mean, if you're established, if not, reach out, book in a chat, and just pick Zara's brain.
Yeah, please do. I love chatting business and I love learning about new businesses. So
awesome.
would love to chat.
Sounds good. Thanks, Zara.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.